Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Andrew Eilers and I'll be going over today's topic of work order management. So in today's webinar, we'll be focusing on the three main topics going over work orders. The first of which is the creation of work orders, so how they are created and brought into SigmaNEST. The next thing we'll be going over is the life cycle of a work order. So how we will get the work order created, what happens after it's created, and how do we know when it's done. And then the last item that we'll be going over is the different statuses of the work order and how that relates to the creation and life cycle of a work order. So first thing that we're going to be talking about is the creation of work orders. There are multiple ways to bring in a work order into SigmaNEST or create one. The first of which is the SimTrans software that we provide. This is a software that you can get that will be a bridge between your MRP or ERP system. So if you submit a quote or submit a work order through your MRP or ERP system, so the quote has been turned into a work order or anything like that, then you can have your MRP or ERP system send that information to SimTrans, which will convert it into information for SigmaNEST to read, and therefore creating a work order within SigmaNEST. It is not limited just to work orders, it also can bring in inventory as well, but the main focus today is going to be over work orders. The next option we have is our manual creation inside of SigmaNEST. So this manual creation is going to be a little bit more tedious than using SimTrans, which is automated. So the manual creation inside of SigmaNEST is going to be pretty straightforward. You'll bring in the parts and then assign those parts to a work order. We'll go more in depth on this later. But with the manual creation, you will be creating one work order at a time, whereas again with SimTrans, it's going to be automated and can create a lot of work orders at the same time automatically. The last option we have is the creation from SigmaQuote or SigmaMRP. SigmaQuote is a module that you can get for SigmaNEST. This is for quoting purposes, as well as creating jobs, and we will go into detail later the difference between a job and a just normal quote and work order. And then the SigmaMRP is going to be for our MRP system. So just like you may have your own MRP or ERP system, we do have our own built and set up MRP system that integrates really well with SigmaNEST and other SigmaNEST products. Next thing we'll be talking about is the life cycle of a work order. Once a work order is created, so after it's been imported through SimTrans, manually create it inside of SigmaNEST, or create it from our SigmaMRP software or a SigmaQuote or job. Once we'll do that, the work order is going to go through four main phases inside of SigmaNEST. So now that it's brought in, the next steps are going to be related to SigmaNEST. So the first part is going to be importing your parts and nest them. So importing the parts from the work order and then going ahead and nesting them. Generating a program, so the program is posted. After the program has been posted, step 3, we will run the program at the machine. And then lastly, we'll be running program update either through SigmaNEST or color offload. The SigmaNEST program update or color offload program update are basically just signifying that the program has been ran and that those parts have been completed. This is also, during this step, you would designate if any parts came out incorrectly. So if it had a bad cut quality or anything like that, then we could reject that part and then add an extra part back to the work order, stating that the work order is still not done. Once we've gone through all those different phases, next we will go to the statuses of the work orders. So throughout that process, we will have 5 different statuses for our work orders. The first of which is not started. So this is when you have first created the work order, and it has a future due date, so it might be due next week, but none of the parts have been nested or posted out or ran at the machine. The next option that we have for our status is overdue, so pretty self-explanatory here. This is just stating that the work order is overdue, so the due date is for a date and time that is previous to today's date, or the date that you're looking at the work order. The next option we have is in progress. So in progress will just state that the program has been posted out for those parts and it is waiting at the machine. So there is a program out there that has been made specifically for these parts in this work order. That is what it is stating with in progress. Partially done is going to be if we have posted out a couple of the parts for that work order, or even if you posted all of the parts and if some of the parts came out bad. So this is just saying that some of the parts in the work order have been completed, but we still have more parts to cut, either that they were not programmed in the first place, or they could be parts that were rejected and need to be reran to fully complete the work order. And the last status we have is going to be done, which is that all of the parts for the work order have been designated as cut and came out the way that they should have, and the work order is done within SigmaNEST. From this point, you can archive your work orders and put them in an archive. That way they can be reviewed later if necessary, and all the work orders in your regular work order list will be actual active work orders, and so you can kind of clean up that clutter that way. So now that we went over the creation and life cycle and the different statuses of the work order, let's go ahead and hop into the software and take a look at what that might look like. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the creation of the work orders. So as I mentioned, we can create that either with SimTrans, manually creating it, or using the quoting module within software, jobs module, should I say. So that would be this guy right here, or utilize the SigmaMRP system as well. In this case, we're just going to go ahead and create a manual work order within inside of SigmaNEST. So to create one, we have a couple different options. We can either go ahead and create a part, so we can just bring in a standard shape, and then in the top window, so we'll just go ahead and click OK, and just go ahead and create just a standard shape. We're just going to bring in a square, and we can just type in a work order name. We do need to make sure that we save the part. All parts in a work order do have to be saved. So I'm going to go ahead and click cancel there. The other option we have is to just go to our work order list and look at all of our different work orders. I do have a couple already in here, a few that are not started. So some of the different statuses you can see here, we have not started. So these are brand new work orders have been created. Nothing's been done on them. And we also have overdue, which again is a work order that has not been started. It's overdue. This one in particular looks like the due date was back in February, so pretty late on that work order there. But just showing the overdue status here. So what we can do is just go ahead and click new. Again, we're going to enter the name of the work order. We're just going to call this test. Click OK. And then you can bring in parts a couple different ways. The first of which is a BOM or a bill of material, or the second is going to be directly from your parts list. So you can come in here and create some or grab some parts. So let's just grab some mild steel, 0.075. Just highlight the ones you want, and then if you want to change the quantity, you can change those here. I'm just going to click OK and click OK. And then what we'll see here is the work order has been created. Inside of that window, we could adjust the due date, all that stuff. And if we need to go back, we can click edit and change that. So again, a couple different ways we can bring those in, either manually, just like we did, or we can use SimTrans, SigmaQuote, or SigmaMRP to do this as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that test. Don't need that right now. and we'll go ahead and click done. So we are done with that. So from here, we need to actually bring in our parts. So heading back in, we'll go ahead and click on our work orders we want to bring in. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to work on this just one customer right here. So this is the second step inside of the work order. So this is the first step inside the life cycle, but the second step in the overall work order scheme. So we're going to look at some of these work orders, and what we're going to see is that we do have an aluminum part in here, so it's not going to be able to be nested with these other mild steel parts. And then if we look in this guy right here, we still have some mild steel, same thickness, so we're good there. But we do want to take into account we do have an aluminum part in there, so we will have to create another nest for that other work order, or task, should I say. But let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and click load. So what load's going to do, it's actually going to go ahead and load in all the parts, so we'll see them pop up here in a second. Give this a second right here, we'll click done. So we have all our parts on the other side. It looks like we changed some information on them, so we have some caution symbols, stuff like there. So we'll just do the auto update and go back, and now they're good to go. So from here, we have our mild steel parts and our aluminum parts. In this case, we're just going to focus on our mild steel. We'll create a nest for the aluminum here in a second. Let's go ahead and we're going to auto nest these. So we went ahead and auto nested our parts, got them on there. We are all set. From here, we'll go ahead and click auto NC and just apply some basic NC to them. So nothing too crazy here. Then we'll go ahead and post out our program. So we'll just call this program work order. Post this out. Okay, so now that we have our program done, the next thing we're going to see is the other status that we have mentioned, which is going to be the in progress. So the in progress will happen once the post button has been hit on those parts that we have imported in for that work order. So this means that there is a program that has been sent out to the shop and it needs to be ran. So that is what in progress means. There's a program. It doesn't mean it's been ran. It's just out there and ready to go. So from here, again, we have a couple different options. So now we are on step 3. So our step 1 for the life cycle was to import the parts and then nest them. Step 2 was posting them out. And then the third one is running it at the machine. So at this point, we would tell the operator, hey, run this program for this work order. And once it's done, we have 2 different options, which is going to be step 4 of the life cycle. So from here, we will either update it with inside of SigmaNEST or update it with color offload. Color offload is going to be a software that your machine operator will use, and this allows them to designate that a program has been ran without having to tell you that it's been ran and then adjusting it inside of SigmaNEST. So it puts everything on the operator to make sure that they designate that the program has been ran. That way you don't have to come in here and keep checking on whether or not they ran the program. So it makes it a lot easier to have color offload in that instance. But in this case, we're just going to keep everything contained within inside of SigmaNEST. So we're going to stick with that. So we're going to have the program update button right here. This is going to be the same button that you would have within inside of color offload. So we can see the machine and all this information that came from here. The program name, so the program name we made was work order. And so what we can do is we're going to click update. And again, as I mentioned, update is going to be designating that the program has been ran at the machine. So we are saying that this program was ran at the machine. So what this does is at that same time, if we have a remnant, puts the remnant back into inventory to be used, as well as updates our work order statuses. So if we go back in the work order, we'll see that we have a couple new statuses. The first of which is done. So this means that this has been done. Every part that was needed has been completed. And then I have this partially done. And this partially done came from the fact that there was an aluminum part within inside of this work order, and I did not make a nest for it. So because of that, we have a partially done status stating that, hey, this has not been done. There are some more parts that need to be ran. So this could either mean one of two things. Either A, in this case, we didn't make a program for those parts and they still need to be made so they can be ran at the machine. Or it could mean that the operator designated that some of the parts came out bad and utilized color offload to designate those parts have been scrapped. And then that way you know that, okay, I need to bring in those parts to be ran or made a program of. That way the order can be complete. The last thing we can do to our work order is archive it. So as we saw, we do have our work order in a done state. So what we can do now is go ahead and archive it. Archiving it is going to say that the work order has been completed. We no longer need it, and when it gets archived, the information is saved. However, we cannot bring the work order back once it has been archived. So once I go ahead and click OK, the work order will be removed from my list. So basically we're getting rid of it from our to-do list. And if we wanted to look at it later to see our different work orders, we can go to our archived work orders, go in here and take a look. And we can see that the work order 8002 produced this program. We can see the parts that were in there, the due date that was on there, and any other pieces of information. So when the program was made, at what time, the machine it was for, how long it took to cut, and all that other piece of information. So we can go back and take a look on any piece of information that we may have questions on. So if we wanted to know when that program was ran, so if there was a hiccup somewhere, we can see where that hiccup may have came from and adjust it and correct it appropriately from there. But again, once the work order has been archived, all this is just information. It is an archive to look at. We are not able to bring this work order back from the archive state. So when you are archiving work orders, just make sure that the work order is complete. And then that way you can kind of get rid of all that clutter inside of the work order list. You can imagine if you left all of your statuses in here that were done, this can get pretty cumbersome and have a lot of different work orders in here that are not needed. So by simply just getting rid of the work orders that are no longer needed, it can clear up a lot of the clutter in here. Beyond SigmaNEST, so after the parts have been cut, the parts within a work order can have a secondary operation that can be managed either through SigmaQuote or SigmaMRP with jobs. So within SigmaNEST, a work order is going to be the time in which the programmer needs to actually have the program done in time for any possible secondary operations. And that is where SigmaQuote and SigmaMRP come into play with jobs. So with a job, this is the full encompass of a work order. So once you get the job and you get the parts in, this includes any secondary processes that may be required. So we can factor in if the part needs to be bent or painted or anything like that. We can factor that in into the job for the software to manage. After the job has been created, we do have another software called SigmaSchedule. This will actually be a software that you can get that will ensure that your parts are completed on time. So whereas when you get a due date on a work order, the due date that is typically inputted into a work order inside the SigmaNEST is when the parts are actually due. So they need to be delivered to the customer. SigmaSchedule will actually ensure that the program due date or the work order due date within SigmaNEST is not going to be related to when the parts need to be delivered, but when they actually need to be cut in time for any secondary operation to be processed on them so they can be delivered on time. So if the part is due next week and it would take a couple days for the part to be bent and painted, as well as programmed, then it will ensure that the due date placed within SigmaNEST is an appropriate deadline for the programmer to make sure that the program is ran at the machine, so it does have enough time to be painted and bent prior to being delivered, and not the work order typical due date that we may see, where the due date is going to be related to the actual delivery date of the parts.